All right, this week I'm joined by Eli Leland. Eli is my go-to for conversations on things that are on the fringe. Last time we talked about ChatGPT. This time we're talking about the UFO UAP hearings from last week. They were pretty amazing, pretty wild stuff to think about that was said in that hearing. And we have a good discussion, kind of breaking it down, some of our thoughts on it. You can see we're a little bit conflicted on ultimately what we think is going on, but it's definitely a fun topic to ponder, and really enjoyed talking to Eli about it. So if you're into that sort of thing, I think you'll really enjoy this pod. So this is the Randy Forcer podcast. As always, subscribe on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Would really appreciate that. Thank you so much for all the support. Thanks for listening. Here's Eli. All right, I'm back with Eli Leland for what is going to definitely be a great conversation. Eli, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure, dude. I love this. This is great.
This is round two for you, man. Last time we did one, it was about ChatGPT. It felt like as close as I got to an emergency podcast. And then here we are back for another, what I consider to be somewhat of an emergency podcast for some news that happened last week. I figured you're the guy to talk to about this kind of stuff. So I think we'll have a fun conversation.
Man, I'm starting to see a pattern. AI, now aliens. What's going to be next, dude? We're going to keep
it's all the weird stuff. It's all the weird stuff that I want you to come on and talk to me about on the podcast. So the news that we're talking about is something that's personally interesting for me. It sounds like it's somewhat interesting for you. It's the congressional hearing on UFOs and UAPs, which I think was historic, according to some people last week, in terms of the content of what it was said and putting that stuff out there under oath. It was kind of a big deal. And there were some pretty stunning revelations. And that's kind of what I want to talk about. But did you get a chance to watch any of that or read any of the highlights from that hearing?
Yeah, I did. And it was like, ever since talking to you, I've been bringing it up to all kinds of people. And apparently, we're like the last to know about it because TikTok's been blasting it. Everybody has some sort of opinion. But what was interesting to me is like, what made this congressional hearing so unique? And they keep talking about whistleblowers and all that, but really it was that, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, David Grush, he is just a high-level government official with a huge amount of names, and when you think about it that way, it's like, cool, name, what's in a name? Well, the government's broken up in so many little teeny categories. If you don't know where anything is. So even the government's lost. So with him, with such high level security and with the names that he can provide and the direction that he can provide, I think that's what makes this absolutely nuts. So I was able to watch like two of the senators do some pretty serious questioning, and that was all I needed. I was like, this is cool.
Yeah, super cool. So let's set the stage for the three people that they had in this hearing. So David Grush is one of them, says a former U.S. intelligence officer, but I think he's on some team that is employed by the Pentagon to study UAP situations. And yes, he's whistleblowing on some of the things, which we'll get to. So he seemed like a credible person-ish to me. The other person is David Fravor. He's an ex-pilot. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was the one that was involved in that Tic Tac incident in San Diego. For people that are unfamiliar with that, the Tic Tac episode was these guys running, a training mission off the coast of San Diego, and they saw this, I think it was a 40-foot Tic Tac UFO that was flying at, I think it was 80,000 feet, and then it dropped in like a second to like 50 feet above the water, and they got it on all of their sensors, but they also visually saw it as well. So their plane, I think, got within a half mile of this thing, and they could see that there was no heat coming from it. There was no way to tell how it was moving in the air, and then it eventually just like blinked out of where they were and ended up like 60 miles away in like a second, which is where they were going next. So it was a very interesting story that guy has. Have you heard that story before?
I have. I follow so much of this stuff that it's none of it's really surprising to me.
When you hear that story, man, it's insane. He was on Rogan. He's been on a bunch of stuff, and it seems like a guy that isn't into this sort of stuff other than the fact that it happened to him. So now he talks about it a lot, but it's not like he's some alien freak that is just like making up a story. He's like a military guy. He talks like a military guy. He seems very credible and had this
Very
very
well.
unique thing happen to him.
Yeah, and that's really what's I think getting a lot of traction right now. These really well-spoken people that aren't specifically out to make movie deals and write books and things of that nature. When there is no ulterior motive and they're just out there being like, listen, we've known about this for a long time. Nobody's talking about it. And as we'll talk about later, is like people are dying because of it. They feel like they're doing their duty as an American citizen to bring it to light. And with all the risks and security things that are coming up, it's like, yeah, we should probably talk about this.
So, yeah. And then the last guy is Ryan Graves, who is another fighter pilot. And his experience with the UAP UFO phenomenon is doing training missions, I believe, off of Virginia Beach. And they would fly up and they would see these things floating in the air. We'll describe what they're like in a later area. But like there's these things that are in the air that, the planes have almost hit. They've always been there. They see them on a daily basis. No one knows what it is. So he was trying to bring some awareness to this. And I think the overall thing that they were trying to get across is create this system for whistleblowing that doesn't affect them negatively, because they have all these other people that have experiences that are either afraid to tell their stories because they're worried about the retaliation from the government or from their employees or employers. And they're trying to create a way to allow people to come out and tell their story without that
I
fear.
think I saw one of the parts of the hearings they asked how often these UAPs are actually getting reported by the military. They're like, "Can you just give us a number?" And he's like, "I think about 95% of people don't do it." They're like, "Okay, so you're saying 5% might get reported?"
Mm-hmm.
And that's wild to me. That's like, man, why didn't I sign up and do that? That sounds
Yeah,
cool.
totally. I mean, they're talking about commercial airline pilots as well because they see a lot of stuff, but they don't report it because there's fear of their airline letting them go or them being reprimanded or punished. So I think that was the main reason for it. But some of the stuff that was brought to light was pretty compelling. So why don't we jump into the list? I want to run through these 5 takeaways and then we can kind of dig into them a little more and see what you think. But the most compelling one, I think it was her last name was Mace, was doing the line of questioning, but it was asking David Grush if we have recovered UFO or non-human crafts and non-human biologics, and he said yes to that, basically confirming that yes, we have crafts, multiple crafts that are not of human origin, and that we have basically bodies of aliens in our possession.
Yeah.
Huge revelation from the thing. I mean, what did you think of when you heard that or read that?
I was like, oh yeah, wow, cool, neat. So I'll throw this out there. I watch for fun when I'm not actually researching stuff. I watch like Y Files, and now I've been turned on this other thing. I think it's called Muta or something. And basically, they come out and they go, okay, cool. What are the conspiracy theories? What can we disprove? And what is like, hey, could be real. Aliens, specific biological things outside of this area, that is so friggin' common in this field that the only thing that blew me away was the things that we didn't really mention on that quote. And it was that we've had this stuff since the 1930s
Mm-hmm.
and they've been playing with this technology and playing with these things. To me, it opened up a whole nother line of questions. Okay, 30 years, how long does it take to change it? Like, we can go down that some other time, but
Yeah.
like, it's just, that's what's wild to me. Not that it's now that he's saying it under oath and he could go to jail if he's lying, but that he's also said that it's since the 1930s. So
Yeah.
just under 100 years we've had this information and these things.
It makes you wonder if there's been any practical applications, because there was also talk, and this isn't part of the revelation piece, that it's like, how does like experimentation with this sort of stuff get funded? And what they were talking about was just like these companies like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, they're bidding on work for other stuff and they're jacking up the prices, and it's basically misappropriation of funds, and that's how these sort of things are getting funded. So it's like, I wonder how much technology that we have, if this is all true, right? This is a big, I guess, asterisk. But if this is all true, how much technology do we have now that's a direct result of some of the stuff that we got from this over the past, like you said, 90 to 100 years?
what was that? I don't remember who it was, but they were talking to this one guy who he was the movie maker. He's 100% in it to tell a story, and
Jeremy Corbell.
yeah, yeah. So he was talking about how we've had all this technology for years. It's like Raytheon and all these other
Yeah.
companies that have been reverse engineering them. And the big thing is that we can move towards this technology, but at a certain point we can't do the. I'm gonna have to jump into it. So I watched the Sean Ryan show. There's this guy
Mhm.
Eric Heckler, and he's talking about how the 0 point energy that flies these things, that the basically free energy in the flight, it's there. We know how to do it, and unfortunately, they just don't want to give us that freedom. And I was talking to somebody. The real thing to me is, okay, why wouldn't somebody want that? And if you go from a teenage or from a somebody in high school that doesn't have a license to having a license, the amount of freedom there is absolutely astronomical. They go from riding a bike or begging for rides to that. You then give somebody the full ability to travel anywhere on the planet and potentially go outside the limits and create problems that way. What could that actually do and all that? So like the technology that's already been slipped into here, you can also go back to that other guy, the other one of the other whistleblowers, Michael Herrera, that says that they've already taken advantage of these UFOs. I don't really understand what the UAP means. What does that mean?
Unidentified aerial phenomenon, I think.
Okay, so this isn't an aerial phenomenon. This is a ship. And he was I don't know if he went under oath, but he was talking about how that these football field things are abducting people, and with you just touched on the fact that misappropriated money from the government is going different places. Well, what about the illegal money created through technology that isn't widely available to anybody else? So
Mhm.
for instance, this particular story, this guy talked about how they were cleaning up an issue, stumbled over a hill, and found a giant football stadium ship that was loading trucks of kids onto it. And when they were like, what the heck? And they started to approach it, they were surrounded. This was a SWAT team that was surrounded by, what is it? A bunch of like men in black baseball hats, and came out very well spoken, just completely just started talking crap to these guys.
Mhm.
And it was a bunch of SEALs or something very high up. I believe they were SEALs. I don't want to say it wrong, but
Yep.
basically just talking them, dropped their guns and totally disarmed them and kicked them off the place. Didn't end up killing them. Their belief was that they were too close to other things going on. But things like that make you wonder. It's like, okay, cool. If somebody has that and they need money, what other kinds of things are they going to do to the money if the government has too much paperwork to just, I have to hide it or I have to cheat it? When they go,
Mhm.
cool, I've got a laser. Why don't I just use that? Like bootleggers back when they could get better guns and better cars, they just broke the rules. They didn't care and they
Yep.
made the money.
Yep. That's interesting. I'll have to listen to that podcast. I know you were telling me about it before.
Yeah.
One of the next things that came up was that the government has murdered people to keep this quiet. So I think it was David Grush again. He seemed to be the guy that talked the most, but he was just saying how he's aware of situations where people have been injured or even killed to keep some of this stuff silent. So not surprising, right? If you assume that all this stuff is true and they're trying to keep it from mainstream media and general public finding out, I wouldn't be surprised that people would get hurt or even killed to kind of keep it a secret.
Yeah, I mean, what was it? I was talking about the 0 point energy stuff. That's a deep rabbit hole, but basically it's free energy pulled out of air.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's actually trademarks that people have got in the past to build these engines so that people can create free energy like Tesla. And if you, I'll point you to Y Files because I like that show. They've taught there's like 2 or 3 videos that they do a deep dive into how these UFOs are actually made and how there's places in the government that people have stumbled upon. And
Mm-hmm.
then when they go to make them, they disappear. There is a long list of people just involved in creating these ships that are been killed off under
Mm-hmm.
strange circumstances. So for them to do that, yeah, no surprise. That's very well known. The other thing that I think came up in this hearing is that they touched upon that there's massive misinformation campaigns, and he wasn't going to name any of those people unless he was under lock and key again.
Yeah.
But with everything out there, you've got people getting murdered. You also have misinformation. So who do you believe and who do you don't? Do you believe
Yeah.
him
That's
under
that.
oath?
That's one of the things in this conversation I want to get to. But he did say a number of times that he wasn't going to throw like names out in the open hearing, and that he was open to having a closed door hearing. And it sounded like some of the lawmakers that he was talking to was interested in that. So I don't know if they would ever do it, but it was weird to me that he wouldn't say some of that information, because it was like, dude, you're whistleblowing. You know what I mean? Like you're whistleblowing, like whistleblow. You know, it's almost like he was operating under this set of rules on things that he couldn't say. But it's like, dude, you're already saying all this stuff that you can't say. Let's just take it to the next level and say it all, because that's what we're doing here, isn't it?
So I agree, and I see what you're saying there, but then I have to wonder, when you think of, actually, I've talked to you about this, doing creative techniques through our business. When you work for a corporation or a large group, you don't just get to go out and be like, whistleblow. You can't. There are repercussions. You, like, if I were to go and say my boss and his boss, they're all just in cahoots doing messed up stuff. Like, they're not. But
Mm-hmm.
like, if I were to do that, there are consequences for that at that given moment. I don't remember what it was. They were saying, okay, well, when was this? I watched a bunch of other podcasts or videos because you made me do this. I'm going to make this clear. I would not have gone down this rabbit hole unless you asked. But they're all talking about, what are the next moves? Where are they going? Are they going to go into this skiff or whatever the heck that was and talk about this and disclose this and what's going to happen next? And the fact is, you and I both know, if you're working at a giant hospital or a huge corporation, it's a multi-million-dollar, let alone the freaking government, if you say we're going to act now, that means a month. So
Mm-hmm.
even as a whistleblower, he's at risk of a lot of bad stuff. He's at risk of going to jail and getting hung by
Yeah.
a thing. Like, who friggin' knows? So
Yeah.
I think that politically and slowly by the book, I think that he made the right decision, and I can only hope he did, because then we
Yeah.
go back to that question: is he just a misinformation dude trying to guide us in another weird direction?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, which a lot of people tend to think is happening. But we will get to that part. Other thing was aliens are doing some murdering, which is saying that some people have died because of their interactions with some of this stuff. And there's talk of like radiation from some of the crafts or from some of the biologics causing people to die. So I don't think that that's a huge surprise when you're dealing with this foreign type stuff that people would die. But it is a big deal to say that stuff under oath, because again, these people have whistleblown, they have told their stories to other places, but this is the first time that anyone's been under oath. So to say that stuff is kind of a big deal, I guess.
yeah, and I mean, like, come on, user error. You get an alien in the 1930s. Are you going to poke it with a stick, or are you going to try to touch to see if it's warm? Either
Mm-hmm.
way, you're opening yourself up to all kinds of different things. So when it
Yeah.
comes to technology, how many people, how many people have shocked the crap out of themselves just plugging in a fan? Come on, it's
Yeah.
like, surprise, surprise, people have got hurt, and we have aliens, and whew, yep,
Yeah.
we're in
I'm
trouble.
sure, I'm sure people are getting hurt. One of the other big things they mentioned is just like what a big threat this is to national security, because they don't know what's going on. So anytime they don't know the origins of something like that, it is a threat to national security, and is a reason to take that stuff seriously. If it affects the flight of these $50 million fighter planes and puts those things at risk, that's worth knowing what's going on. There's talk of those things shutting down nukes above military bases and stuff. So, if this technology ended up in the wrong hands, it's definitely a threat to the United States, just like it's a threat to the world.
Yeah, I mean, of course, of course. You got to wonder, what's a bigger threat, that somebody else gets the technology, or that the other beings that come out here just go, yeah, this is, you guys can't do anything. You
Mm-hmm.
just don't have this technology. We're back to the prohibition. We've got faster cars and we got better guns. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
So
So yeah, I mean, definitely one of the reasons why I think the government's taking this more seriously, or at least they're putting that out there as taking it more serious. The last big revelation is that it says not Hollywood's vision of a spacecraft. So like some of the stuff they saw is not what you might think it looks like. We talked about what the Tic Tac was, 40-foot Tic Tac shaped thing with no heat signatures, no form of propulsion. That's not something that you see in a Independence Day or something like that. The other thing that I mentioned off the coast of Virginia Beach is they said it was clear glass-ish looking cubes with these round spheres inside of them just floating in the air, and they're there every day, and they have to watch out for them with the ships. I mean, that sounds freaking bizarre, you know?
It's kind of like, and now you care.
I mean, so this kind of leads me to the thing that I want kind of close with, and it's not a 2-second conversation, it's definitely a few minutes, but like, if this stuff's all true, like, how do we not have better footage of this, especially the stuff they say is there every day, these floating cubes with black spheres inside? It's like, why do we not have better pictures of this sort of stuff? Why is everything a grainy picture that's from a distance? Like, I can't quite wrap my head around how all this stuff is real. Maybe the stuff back in the 50s or whatever, but like, it's 2023. We've all had phones in our pocket for the past 15 years. Like, how do we not have better footage?
Well, go back to the misinformation. Anything that is out there, people are they're just gonna debunk. They're gonna say, no, this isn't right. You put one misinformation person at the top ranks of UFO identification, and there are big groups that are UFO identification teams, and there are some that are already proven as government officials that are bunk and you do not go to them. So like, if let's just say that if I'm paid by the government, but I'm also the number one dude that can verify or make these go away, like, that's one way to make them all go. The other way is having access to everybody's information on their phones. You know, what was it? As you said that, I the first thing that came to my mind was that movie during 2020 was Don't Look Up. How many people are just like, oh, that's wild, and they just don't look up?
I actually really like that movie. It says a lot about the state of things right now. I mean, honestly, this could, yeah, an alien ship could come over New York City, and half the people would just be like, okay, I'm just
You
onto
really
my
see
next thing.
that? You really think that's an alien ship?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like right there. That is a funny point, though. It makes me wonder if there was like a big disclosure event where a lot of this stuff came out, like what would happen to society if people would really just be like, okay, business as usual, like, oh, that's cool, but I'm worried about putting gas in my car, and then people really move on quickly, or if it's the type of thing where like people don't go to work and it just changes everything.
Well, I guess that's a pretty aggressive way to look at it. People just basically, in other words, just giving up. They're like, I'm not getting gas. I just like, why go to work? I can't figure out why even that would happen. For me, half my family is very, very religious. So I ended up having the conversation with them beginning of July, because in the beginning of July, I think they've been disclosing stuff. There's just so much talk lately about aliens. I think there was something in, I think it was New Mexico or something, and the police caught something on their chest cam, and then
This is in Las Vegas. They caught something that looked like they crashed. People called and said there was like things in my backyard.
yeah, so like, if that's up, you gotta, the first thing to me that makes sense is like, okay, yes, aliens, aliens, sure. Everybody believes that. I believe that. You say it's from the 30s, fine. Well, what about religion? When I go and I say, hey, Joe, let's say aliens are real. Let's say there's like 100 different types. Let's say one comes down, shows you exactly what's happening with technology that we can prove, and then totally debunks all religion that you believe in and says that's man-made and something that you guys have developed over time.
Mm-hmm.
So I said this to him, and the dude that I talked to, very smart dude. We're not going to go into detail. Very smart dude.
Yep.
He looked at me and he quoted straight from the Bible. There's going to be a lot of false prophets, whatever part that is. I can't quote the Bible, but he's like, there's going to be a lot of false prophets. Don't believe them. And I was like, okay, so that being said, and I said, okay, that being said, that quote, what you just told me, but if we know that that is 100% not real, where do you go from there? He's like, nothing changes. So I think there's going to be some confusion on what to do. I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be looking for stuff. And I think this is going to be just another thing. There's also this movie or TV show where the aliens actually kind of like joined in and then just joined society. I don't remember what it's called. I grew up with it. But
Mm-hmm.
I have a hard time believing that we're not already surrounded by different aliens at this time. And if they've been here since 1930 and it's just there's just so much wildness. So I think we've built in a lot of safeguards in
Yep.
our general society so that if something like that were happening, we've already had a slow burn to that point. So a lot of people have already questioned, like, what would I do? Anybody that's
Yep.
going, I'm not working anymore, they did that during COVID, so we're good.
Yeah, they got that out of their system. Maybe
You're
that
like,
COVID was
dude,
a for it all.
like aliens are
If
real. I have to go to work. Otherwise, I'm going to sit at home, be freaked out, and just pray for the sun.
if that event happened, it would be one of the biggest things in human history. So I guess you don't really know how everyone reacts until you're kind of in the middle of it, but it's definitely something interesting to think about. End of the day, how likely do you think that this is legit or some type of government psyop that is meant to direct our attention away from something else? Because honestly, dude, there's a lot of people that think that online. When I do some reading,
Of
I
course.
jump on Twitter, I jump on something, like half the comments are like, this is all fake, everything that they're saying,
Of course.
which is fair. I mean, yeah, we're talking about aliens. It's definitely like a crazy thing, but it's hard for me to balance the two. I don't know what I believe more or less.
Well, the only thing that I can think of is logically, you look up. Do you really think there's nothing out there? And
Yeah.
then the other thing is like, what is going on in the world right now? War in Russia, trying to throw over powers. You got some crazy stuff in Asia and over in that way. You've got brick forming. You've got a lot of new things happening. Cryptocurrency is sneaking in and all these things. For me, I go, this is a great distraction. This is a beautiful distraction. But what if it's not a distraction? Like it may like you can say all you want that it's not real. You can say all you want that this is not a thing, but what if
Yeah.
it actually is? For me, I'm more apt to just be like, well, let's give it a month and see if somebody doesn't get nuked. And if nobody gets nuked, then this is real.
Yeah, trying to take some of the heat off of a potential nuke being dropped. Yeah,
Yeah.
man, I'm in the mind frame of I don't know. I look at these people and I think, what do they have to gain by doing this? By coming out and putting these things out there and being part of this hearing? I don't know that I've quite gotten to the point that I would think that these people are full blown lying. And it's like, do they not realize what they're saying? Or do they not realize that what they saw isn't true? Like, I just can't imagine that they are being instructed to say the things that they are as part of some overall plan to like distract from something else. So it's off the wall stuff. And I'm still just kind of taking it all in because I think it's a fun thing to think about. But
Yeah.
I'm anxious to hear more.
Yeah. I mean, let's see some cool technology. I don't care about aliens. I don't care about anything. I want to see some cool technology.
So, anyways, we'll definitely be on the lookout for more information. Is there anything else that you wanted to share or anything that struck you before we wrap it up?
No, no. I got nothing, dude. I'm gonna leave it. Like we could go on and on and on and on and on about a bunch of different stuff. It's a wild situation.
It definitely is, man.
I think this is
Thanks
good.
for chatting about it. It was crazy to see last week, and like I said, we'll be on the lookout for stuff to happen in the next month. If nothing happens, if we don't get nuked in the next month, it's real. That's what
That's it.
that's the clothing
That's
thought.
the rule.
Awesome, dude. Thank you for coming on and talking about it. Look forward to the next, fringe topic for us to discuss with everybody.